The phone rang while Edward Reeves sat alone on his patio, a week before Father's Day.
You were never really my father anyway, Edward. I just wanted you to know that.
There was no anger in Brian's voice, only a cold finality that had been building for years.
35 years of fatherhood, and this is how it ends.
I've been reconnecting with my biological roots. It's time I was honest about who I am.
Is that so, Brian? And what does your mother have to say about these roots?
A pause, then Brian's laugh came through, devoid of warmth. She'll understand. Eventually, the line clicked dead. Edward sat motionless. Then slowly he stood and walked inside to his study.
I've suspected for 30 years. It's time I knew for certain.
That night, alone, he opened his laptop and ordered a discreet at-home DNA paternity test. The test kit arrived in a plain box 3 days later. Edward carried it to the kitchen and opened it with slow, deliberate hands. Inside were sterile swabs, a sample envelope, a pre-addressed mailer, all clinical and cold, like objects from a world he never wanted to enter.
Just a hair. That's all the test requires. The booklet says.
He searched the back of the hall closet, past old coats and forgotten shoes until he found a box marked Brian, high school. The yearbook fell open to the senior class pages. Under Brian's photograph, a single strand of brown hair had been pressed for 2 decades.
Forgive me, Brian. This secret has lasted long enough.
With tweezers from the bathroom drawer, he extracted the hair and sealed it into the collection envelope. He drove to the post office and mailed the sample that afternoon. Back home, the kitchen felt emptier, the clock louder. In the following days, memories rose unbidden. The crayon drawing on the refrigerator, my dad scrawled in shaky 6-year-old script, and the slammed door at 17, the voice that cracked with a rage never fully healed. You are not my real dad. 9 weeks passed. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday morning, a thin windowed sleeve bearing the lab's name. Edward pulled it from the mailbox and stood in the driveway a long moment, the weight of 35 years pressing into his palm.
I already know what this says.
Inside, at the kitchen table, he slit the envelope with a butter knife. His hand did not shake. A single sheet, folded in thirds. At the bottom, in clinical boldface, the only line that mattered, probability of paternity, 0%. He read it 3 times. The words did not change.
So there it is. A son who was never mine, and a life built on a lie.
He set the paper down beside his coffee cup and sat motionless as the sun climbed the kitchen wall.
He doesn't know. No one knows. And Father's Day is coming.
Edward folded the report and carried it to the patio, where he sat alone, the green garden a soft blur behind him. For the next few days, the folded report remained within arm's reach, on the nightstand, at the breakfast table, a silence that filled the house.
Brian doesn't get to know. Not before Father's Day.
He had decided to give Brian one last chance, a Father's Day untainted by the test's shadow.
If Brian still chooses to call me father, then perhaps 35 years can outweigh one sheet of paper.
The evening before the barbecue, Edward poured a single whiskey and sat alone in the dim living room.
After Sunday, I'll deal with the truth, but I won't rob him of the choice.
He folded the paper once more, as he had 100 times already, the creases now soft and permanent. Then he slipped it into the inside pocket of his white linen jacket, the one he planned to wear. He stood on the patio, the garden dark and quiet, the jacket hanging open, and felt the paper's weight against his chest. It was the weight of a decision delayed, not avoided. On Thursday evening, Edward's phone lit up with a notification he'd been dreading. Brian had posted publicly, "Finally found my biological roots. Big reveal at the Father's Day barbecue. Don't miss it." The post already had 47 likes. Relatives were commenting heart emojis as if Brian had announced an engagement.
He's not just cutting me off. He's selling tickets.
In the kitchen, Linda caught his expression and her hand froze mid-reach for a flower stem.
Edward, what did Brian say this time?
It's nothing, Linda. Just the same old song. He'll be fine after Sunday, I am sure.
She didn't believe him. Her fingers trembled as she returned to the arrangement, petals quivering under her touch. On the refrigerator door, the calendar page for June had a red circle around Sunday with the words Dad's Day and Linda's handwriting.
Whatever happens on Sunday, at least the waiting ends. Then I'll know if 35 years of love meant anything to him.
That evening, Edward and Linda sat at opposite ends of the long dining table, the silence thicker than the roast chicken aroma.
Edward, I need to talk about Brian. All these posts, this party. I am afraid of what he's going to say.
Afraid? Why? Has he told you something I should know?
He keeps mentioning his biological roots. I don't know where he got that idea.
Edward watched her fingers twitch against the tablecloth. He'd seen that gesture before, whenever she was hiding something.
Linda, is there something about Brian that you've never told me? Something about his birth?
She opened her mouth, closed it. Then she looked past him, toward the window, her voice barely a whisper.
He was always a difficult child. Maybe we pushed him too hard.
You are not answering the question, but I've learned to be patient.
He stood up, pushed his chair in carefully, and walked out of the dining room without looking back. That night, after the house fell silent, Edward stood before Linda's old cedar chest, the one she'd kept locked for 30 years. The key was hidden in her jewelry box. He'd known about it for a decade, but never used it until now. Inside, beneath folded linens, lay a bundle of letters tied with a faded pink ribbon. The top one was dated 1988, 6 months before Brian's birth. He slid the letter out and read the first line, "My darling Linda, I can't stop thinking about our nights together." The rest of the words blurred.
So this is the truth. She always knew Brian wasn't mine.
He carefully folded the letter and slipped it into his pocket, then closed the chest and replaced the key exactly as he'd found it. Downstairs, the hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. Edward stood in the kitchen, staring at the calendar, the red circle glaring.
I won't say anything. Not yet. Sunday will be his stage. I'll let him play the leading man.
He pulled the worn letter from his pocket and placed it on the kitchen counter. Next to the wedding ring, he slid off his finger. Then he walked upstairs to bed alone, leaving both the letter and the ring to wait in the dark. The phone shrilled at 7 the next morning. Edward already sat at the kitchen table, coffee growing cold.
Don't forget tomorrow, Edward. No theatrics. Just sit and smile like a good father.
I'll be there, Brian. I've never missed a Father's Day.
Brian hung up. Edward set the phone down, his eyes drifting to the wedding ring on the counter. Then he crossed to the closet and pulled out his white linen jacket. Inside the pocket, the folded report waited.
One more day. Then this paper either stays hidden or destroys everything.
He stood before the hall mirror, adjusting the collar, holding his own gaze.
I've played the father for 35 years. Tomorrow, he plays the son.
He slipped on the jacket, felt the report's weight against his chest, and stepped outside into the afternoon sun. The neighborhood was quiet, the calm before a storm only one man knew was coming. Father's Day dawned clear and warm. In the kitchen, Linda arranged a bouquet with hands that couldn't stay still.
Happy Father's Day, Edward.
Yes, it will be.
Linda's smile shook and vanished. She turned back to the tulips, her back a wall he knew too well. She left soon after, her car disappearing down the street. Edward stood at the window, a long moment, then reached for his jacket. He slipped it on, felt the paper still pressed inside, and walked out to his own car. At Brian's house, the driveway was packed. Edward parked a block away and walked the rest, the noise of the party rising like a tide. Through the side gate, the entire yard was in motion, relatives laughing, children chasing, and Brian at the center, a glass raised even before midday. Edward took a seat at the far end of the longest table, away from the crowd. His hand drifted to his jacket, resting on the folded sheet.
A few more hours. Then this ends. One way or another.
Linda spotted Edward at the far table and cut through the crowd, her face pale and her jaw tight.
Edward, we need to talk. Now. Please.
She pulled him into the shadow of a trellis. Her eyes were wet. I never meant for this to happen. Brian isn't yours. I had an affair before he was born. Edward didn't flinch. He reached into his jacket and unfolded the DNA report.
I know, Linda. Probability of paternity. 0%. I've known for 9 weeks.
Linda's hand flew to her mouth. She stared at the paper as if it were a grenade pin he'd just shown her.
You knew? All this time? Please, Edward, don't tell him. Not today. Not at his party.
Edward folded the paper again and tucked it back into his jacket. I didn't come here to destroy him, but he has a speech to make. From across the yard, a fork clinked against a glass. Brian's voice rose above the chatter. The speech was beginning. Edward turned to face the crowd, his hand still on the paper. Linda stood frozen beside him, her legs refusing to move. Brian moved through the crowd with the rehearsed ease of a man who believed the day belonged to him and only him. An aunt caught his arm, her voice carrying, "Where's Edward, Brian? I haven't seen him all afternoon." Brian's hand flicked toward the far end of the yard without him breaking his stride. The gesture was a dismissal.
Oh, he's around. Probably sitting by himself counting the minutes until this party is over.
At the distant table, Edward sat with his hands clasped, the white linen jacket still and the weight inside like a stone. Linda stood rigid by the punch bowl, twisting a napkin until her knuckles went white.
Let them whisper. I've held this truth for 9 weeks. Another hour won't change what I already know.
Brian stepped onto the planter, fork clinking against his glass in 3 sharp taps. The noise of the party collapsed into an expectant murmur. 30 faces turned toward the man with the wine glass. Edward's fingers found the folded paper inside his jacket. He didn't reach for Linda.
Thank you all for coming out on Father's Day. It means the world to have the people I actually care about in one place. I've been doing a lot of research this year. Real research. The kind that involves DNA and a lot of late-night phone calls.
Linda's napkin tore under her grip. She didn't look at Edward, but she felt his stillness, a stone amid the noise.
He's going to do it. After 35 years, he's going to say the words out loud.
And guess what? Science doesn't lie. Neither does history. I've found my real biological father. The man whose blood actually runs through my veins.
A few guests exchanged glances. An uncle's smile froze, his fork pausing over the potato salad. The cheerful hum of the party had curdled. Edward remained absolutely still, his hand on the paper, as if he were holding a heartbeat that could stop at any moment.
So today, I'm closing a chapter that should have ended decades ago.
Linda's face drained of all color. She knew exactly what chapter he meant. Her lips formed a silent prayer. Brian raised his glass higher, the wine catching the afternoon sun like a stage light. The yard held its breath.
And so, with a clear heart and a clean conscience, I am officially and publicly disowning Edward Reeves for 35 years of failure as a father.
The silence that followed was absolute. 30 people frozen in the afternoon sun. Not a fork moving, not a child crying. Linda buried her face in her hands, a muffled sob escaping through her fingers that only Edward, standing near, could hear. Edward didn't flinch. His face was a mask of weary peace, as if he had been watching this scene for decades. Then, very slowly, with the calm of a man who had rehearsed this 1,000 times, his hand slipped inside his white linen jacket. The movement was deliberate, unhurried, a man pulling out a grocery receipt, not a weapon. Every eye in the yard followed his fingers as they emerged, holding a folded sheet of paper, creased soft from 100 openings. Brian's smirk faltered, just for a heartbeat, as his eyes registered the paper, a flicker of doubt cracking the performance. Linda's head lifted, her tear-streaked face watching the paper in Edward's hand like a condemned woman seeing the executioner's blade. Edward held the paper in his lap, thumb on the crease, and lifted his calm gaze to Brian for the first time since the barbecue began.
Are you entirely sure, Brian? Because what you just said can never be taken back. Before you answer, listen carefully.
What is there to listen to? You've been a failure for 35 years. Nothing can undo that.
Edward's hand, steady as stone, unfolded the paper with the care of a man unwrapping a fragile heirloom. The laboratory letterhead appeared first, then the official seal, the words paternity test results, printed in bold at the top. Brian's sneer dissolved, his lips parting as he read the letterhead. The wine glass in his hand trembled. Edward held the paper open, the words facing the crowd, but made no move to read aloud. Not yet.
I asked you a question, Brian. Are you sure you want this? Because once I read this, there is no unhearing it.
Just get on with it, old man. Whatever sob story you've cooked up won't change the fact that I am not your son.
The guests held their breath, a sea of frozen faces. Edward's eyes never left Brian's, his expression unchanged. Then, in the quietest voice that still carried to every corner of the yard, he began.
Probability of paternity, 0%.
He read the line as if it were the morning weather, flat, unsurprised, the tone of a man who had known for years. The silence that followed was not the absence of sound, but a presence heavy and suffocating, pressing on every chest. He folded the paper with the same ritual slowness, then set it on the table as gently as a man placing a white flag on a battlefield.
You disowned a man who already knew and loved you anyway.
Brian's face did not just fall, it collapsed, the smugness draining like water from a broken dam. His wine glass, forgotten, tilted and crashed to the stone, shards spinning into the silence. Linda's sob was a muffled, keening thing, her nails biting into her own palms to keep the sound inside. The crowd was a painted fresco of horror, cousins with hands over mouths, uncles frozen mid-bite. Edward stood, the chair scraping back, and the sound was the only thing in the universe. Without a word, Edward turned toward Linda, leaning down to press a kiss to her tear-soaked cheek. The gesture lasted only a second, but it said everything their 35 years of marriage could not. Then he straightened, the paper clutched in his hand, and began walking toward the side gate. The guests parted as if he carried a disease, their feet shuffling to clear a path no one dared block. Behind him, Brian stumbled forward, one hand out, his voice breaking like a child's.
Dad? Dad, wait!
Edward did not break stride. His shoulders remained square, his pace unhurried, as if the word Dad was now a foreign language. Linda collapsed into the nearest chair, her sobs the only sound in the stifling vacuum of the backyard. The screen door groaned shut, and the sound of a car engine turning over filled the heavy afternoon. Not a single guest had moved. And then the soft crunch of tires on gravel, and Edward Reeves was gone. On Monday morning, Edward Reeves walked up the courthouse steps, a manila envelope under his arm. The lawyer warned that signing the divorce petition was irreversible. Edward picked up the pen without a word. His signature was firm. Edward Howard Reeves, the 11th of June. Petition for dissolution of marriage. By noon, the stamped document was filed. The marriage was over. He drove to the house, pulled a piece of notepaper from a drawer, and wrote 3 words. He set the note beside his wedding ring on the kitchen counter. The note read, "I already knew." Later, Linda entered the silent house. A suitcase stood by the front door. The divorce documents lay on the hall table. She walked into the kitchen and saw the note. Her fingers trembled as she lifted it. When she read the words, she didn't cry. She just stood there, the paper shaking in her grip. Outside, in the quiet of a June evening, the empty patio chair looked out over a garden that asked no questions. Weeks passed. Edward kept to his garden, the rhythm of watering and weeding a quiet anchor. Then the first letter came, a handwritten envelope with Brian's address on the back. He held it for a moment, then set it on the desk, unopened.
Not yet. I am not ready to hear what he has to say.
The days turned cooler, more letters arrived, sometimes 2 a week, each with the same neat handwriting. Edward placed them in a neat stack, never breaking the seal, never letting the words inside. One envelope, slightly open, revealed the phrase, "I am so sorry," peeking through the torn paper.
He's hurting. I know, but my peace was hard won. I won't surrender it yet.
By autumn, the stack had grown to 14 letters, a silent monument on his old writing desk, and Edward carried on watering his tomatoes, the letters waiting in the quiet like unanswered questions. 3 years after the Father's Day barbecue, Edward sat at his desk and slid the top letter from the stack. He unfolded the paper, the handwriting slanted with emotion. The letter began with 2 words, "Dear Dad," then, in trembling ink, "I am so sorry. For everything. I have no right to ask for forgiveness." Edward read the rest without moving, his eyes steady. The letter spoke of regret, lost time, and a son who had finally understood.
I forgave you the day I got the result. The walking away wasn't punishment. It was peace.
He rose, walked to his writing desk, and took out a single sheet of cream paper. He wrote only 2 lines, the pen firm and unhurried, as though the words had been waiting for years. "I forgave you the day I got the result. The walking away wasn't punishment. It was peace." He sealed the envelope, wrote Brian's address on the front, and sat for a long moment with it in his hand. Then, in the amber light of early evening, he walked to the mailbox and sent his only reply. 3 days later, Brian Reeves picked up a thin envelope from his doormat, the return address in handwriting he hadn't seen in 3 years.
He actually wrote back. After all these years, he didn't just ignore me.
He opened it with trembling fingers, the paper thin and worn, and read the 2 lines aloud to the empty room.
I forgave you the day I got the result. The walking away wasn't punishment. It was peace.
His voice cracked on the word peace, and then he was crying, the paper shaking in his grip.
He forgave me, but he's not coming back. That's the peace he chose.
He slid down the wall, sat on the cold floor, and held the letter against his chest as the light through the window moved across the room.
I am so sorry, Dad.
He didn't call, he didn't write again. He simply folded the letter carefully and slid it into his pocket. The forgiveness was real, and now, finally, so was the silence between them. And on the same evening, hundreds of miles away, Edward Reeves sat on his wooden patio chair. The folded DNA report lay in his lap, worn soft from years of handling. He opened it once more.
It was worth it. Every hard choice, every silent night.
He folded the paper again with the same ritual care, the creases now part of its fabric. The sun sank behind the garden, painting the world in gold and shadow. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves. He didn't need anything else. Somewhere, a bird called. Somewhere, a son was finally learning to carry his own weight. Edward leaned back, the chair creaking softly, and closed his eyes. Around him, the garden grew, untroubled and eternal. And in that stillness, the man who had once been a father was simply a man at rest. The next morning dawned warm, the garden needing nothing from him except his presence, and he gave it freely. The folded DNA report lay on the patio table, held down by a small stone. Its creases were deep and permanent now. He hadn't looked at it since yesterday. He didn't need to. The truth was no longer a weight. Some burdens you carry, not because you can't release them, but because they became part of who you are. The silence after his reply to Brian was not empty. It was a quiet that held all the love and all the letting go. He had given the boy 35 years of fatherhood, no questions asked, and in the end, he gave him the truth wrapped in grace. The son would walk his own road now, carrying the letter as both wound and compass. The old man had already reached his destination. On that ordinary evening, the man who wasn't Brian's biological father sat down on his wooden chair and watched the sky turn amber. It had always been beautiful. He simply had the quiet now to let it be, and that was enough.